social media and history. This is what we're here for. This is what I do. So yeah, is the thing looking good, Teresa?
Okay, Laura, just a second. I'll hand over to Jenny. She will briefly introduce you, and then you can go ahead. Enjoy.
Great. Sorry for the talk.
Hi, everyone. No, that was great. Thank you very much, Laura. So I can see that most of the participants are coming from the previous panels. So I think Karen is joining us. Hi, Karen. Nice to see you here. And for the record,
good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Hi, Karen. For the record, this is a panel for the International Archaeology Day, and we're talking about archaeology and cultural heritage here. And I would like to thank all of you, all the participants, online followers around the world, and our panelists and guests, and especially our partners, the Archaeological Institute of America, and our main partners and moderators, Natasha from Behind the Trowel, Megan called Egyptian Rose, and Laura from Las Plumas de Simurg, as well as Nadeem from Eranud Turan, Amelia from Amelia the Archaeologist, and Milena from Mimo Artist. And we're going to jump right in. Our moderator for this session is going to be Laura Castro Royo. Laura is an art historian researching the legendary bird Simurg in text and image in medieval Iran. She's the director of the online public project Las Plumas de Simurg, dedicated to Mesopotamia and Iran. And over to you, Laura. You may say a couple of words about yourself if you like.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I said this before, I'm going to say this again. Happy International Archaeology Day. Here's to the first of many. And thank you for joining us from the last panel, because we actually left out so many interesting points that I really want to bring back to it. As has been said, I have my own project on social media. I have a Twitch channel where I live stream about Iran and Mesopotamia. And I think this panel fits like a glove, because it's just about digital future of archaeology and social media, which I think is very important. So I'm just gonna bring the sazon in here. Let's just start off with a very nice question. In Spanish, we use a beautiful word to describe the sharing of historical academic knowledge with the general public. We call this divulgación, which we don't have in English, but we should. And in the past 5 years, I've seen a rise, like an increasing in these projects that connect both sides, academic and public. And I want to know, coming from the old backgrounds, because we have seen, let me tell you, you're not prepared for what's coming, because we have a digital marketing executive, a lecturer, a television producer, an archaeologist. We have many archaeologists in here. So what's your opinion on this increasing activity in social media regarding heritage, archaeology, history in general? So over to you, my speakers.
I think it's I think it's really great. I'm the digital marketing executive, so but I was an archaeologist, but now I work like in digital marketing for a consultancy. But I think it's really great because it's the democratization of archaeology. I really think it furthers that in terms of giving so much more people visibility and accessibility to what's out there. And kind of one of the other panels that I was in was talking about breaking down walls and building bridges. And I think that social media is a really great way for us to be able to do that. So yeah, I also have my own YouTube channel and Instagram. I just started an Instagram, so I'm trying to grow that, but I don't know. I think I'm too old for that, but YouTube, I think is a really, really great resource.
I am there with you. Instagram is complicated. I was taught into the ways of mysterious Instagram. So I was the one who said about the bridges and not walls. I think that's the only smart thing that I've said in the whole afternoon. So Natasha, what do you think? Because you also have your own project, which is Behind the Trowel, which I'm a big fan of, by the way. And so what's your experience about this? What's your feeling about this?
Well, I think we wouldn't all be here if we didn't think it was important, and that's where it is. We're a community of individuals, and I think it's so important for people to see archaeology, and that is through the digital realm now. and having the opportunity to work with each other. Most of the people here I've met through Instagram or YouTube. Karen, for instance, we had mutual friends and we bumped into Clubhouse together. And so for those of you who don't know, Clubhouse is like a digital app. It's an app on your phone. At the time, at one point, it was exclusive to iPhone users only. So that was a bit interesting. But it meant that you could have this sort of like radio podcast format. And I bumped into Karen on there. And then we created a Archaeology and History 101 club on there. And it's like the fastest growing archaeology club now on that app, you know, and it's something that I never would have done. I actually don't like the sound of my voice. And sometimes it's interesting when you're talking and you can't see somebody's face. Like I speak when I'm looking at people's expressions. I know when, okay, I need to stop talking now, sort of thing, because I can see it. But when it's just your voice, you're like, oh wow, this is new and uncomfortable. So I think sometimes we have to go through those stages and find what's uncomfortable for us, and to do it. And of course, for anyone who doesn't know, yes, Behind the Trowel, we do a lot of live streaming on there as well. We did a series called Archaeologists in Quarantine, which is inspired by the current events. So doing that as well and having something live and interactive, just like this, but with the general public, really speaks volumes in the sense of what the public want and what they need. It's kind of two different things, right? They want that tantalizing discovery, but that's not always the reality. So it's getting that balance. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, Tash, hi, good to see you. It's been ages.
Hey,
I'm Karen, everybody. And I just wanted to hop in. Thanks for introducing the project that we worked on, our AH 101. And I think you're absolutely right. You know, the general public wants not just to sort of feel like they're part of the discovery, but to be part of all the ways that we produce and consume historical knowledge. I mean, I come from a background of very, very traditional, spent forever in school in academics. So teaching and doing field archaeology through academic institutions. And then I worked with museums and other heritage sites, living history museums and heritage properties. And I loved it all. I felt frustrated that I wanted to engage in broader and more interactive dialogue with everybody, not just the other 5 people who specialized in what I did. And that's kind of the nature of academic discourse. And that's what it's designed to be. And it designs very detailed, very accurate contributions to our understanding of the past. But the problem is that it stays in its little bubble. And, you know, part of the problem with that is just that the ivory tower is a real thing. I mean, it is designed that way. It is a gatekeeper organization, fundamentally speaking. And, you know, I think that's increasingly problematic as the job market in academia gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And I think as people in the general public are more accustomed through all of the explosion of digital platforms such as social media to having a chance to participate in important conversations in all aspects of life, whether they be business, politics, just pop culture, you know, whatever's trending. But I think history belongs there as well. History really does belong to everybody. So it's what's pushed me just really by choice into almost exclusively working in more popular media for the past, I'd say, decade now. And that's great. That has included a lot of factual TV. And that's actually something that Tash and I share. We've done some shows together, which has been fun. I created a game for kids that would enable them to learn a bit about history and archaeology in, you know, on their own terms, having fun, playing the kind of games they would download from the App Store anyway, and podcasting. And I love all that. That's great, popular audience. But as Tash said, I really get excited when we come up with a channel for two-way dialogue. And to me, that needs to be the future of digital archaeology and history through social media. So I'm really excited to see what's next down the pike. I think Clubhouse is great. I think it's still limited by the fact that it's app-based and it's still a little bit of there's a lot of friction to participate. And the way the rooms work is nice. However, it's hard to really get a big enough audience to feel like you're making a true impact. So yeah, it was really fun to dip a toe in there, and can't wait to see what's next.
I think that's an excellent point. I mean, the previous panel, we also commented how history is not ours, is not for any elite. It's not definitely not of the people. It doesn't belong to the people that study professionally it. It is from all of us, because actually cultural heritage is what makes us what we are today, the interests we have, the things we worry about, the things we find important. And I also thank you so much, Karen, for bringing up the game that you made, because I am a big of a gamer myself. And I mean, I said it before, I'm going to say it again, I was brought into history by books and by Age of Empires. I still to this day play Age of Empires. Thank you. Yes, I'm really sorry about that. So I wanted to ask you, and of course, if the public, if the listeners have any kind of questions, just type it on the chat and I'll make sure I just gets delivered to the speakers. Thoughts on video games, art and archaeology? Do you think that's a big yes or that's a big no? Because the possibilities are as good as they are. Oh yeah, Amelia, I saw you raise a hand. They are good, but also they're quite dangerous. So Amelia, you go first.
Can you hear me? Oh, hold on one second. Okay, wanted to make sure you could hear me. Okay, we're good to go here. Okay, one thing about, speaking of technology, I wanted to mention Darren and Kosh had said that about the clubhouse. It was very cool. I didn't know about that, and I didn't realize that it wasn't even accessible at all. Captioning, there's no transcript. For specifically deaf-blind people, we have to be involved in, specifically for apps, we kind of feel excluded. And thinking of apps in general, inclusion is a big serious thing now. Right now, the content that we are in, and we could provide different companies, how do we portray that to them? Say they think they invented an app and they don't think about the audience that it's going to attract in that way. So the issue with archaeology is they're always focused on the public type of audience, and they do have wonderful apps and different things in social media, but maybe 5 out of 2 people in a group or a culture could, out of 200 people, sorry, maybe 5 of us would be interested in archaeology out of 200 people. And maybe they'll change in the future, and that maybe this will be different in 20 or 30 years from now. But I just feel like if we start it now and a gap and then bridge that gap, then in the future we could have possibly make it in a long-term goal and more accessibility. There's fine if there's just a few people, as you were saying, but when you broaden the audience and make it more accessible, and social media is great for that because we can, but different apps and things are limited to specific audiences.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that it's very important keeping it up, keeping it front the diversity of discourses and methods, that there's not only one valid way to share. And I think that is also one of the big advantages is many like this multi-platform media that we have. There's Twitch, there's YouTube, there's podcasts, and there's also some kind of interactive like the games Karen was talking about. So I don't know if Nadeem, what's your own experience with these? Because Nadeem here, my brother in arms, he is a reenactor, and I'm gonna keep on advertising you. I'm sorry, that's what you get when you're good. That's what you get when you're good at your job, brother. So yeah, what's your own experience on this?
So honestly, I found last week just Googling what Clubhouse is, because I have never heard of it. So yeah, I didn't know it was a thing until you guys mentioned it. Anyway, so in terms of like social media and outreach and things, I think it's probably one of the most powerful tools that we have. And especially these days when everything is, there's a big push towards doing things virtually because there's a plague and, you know, whatever. Yeah, I think social media is very useful for that. So in my own experience, so I run an Instagram, a Twitter, and a Facebook, and a YouTube, which I don't really do anything on because it takes a lot of effort to produce video content. And I have a Patreon as well, which I think you and I both have one. And I think that's probably a big topic to cover at a later point, because it's changed a lot of things about how I do things. In any case, back on topic. So in terms of outreach and things, these channels are crucial, but there's a way to do it. Like, I've seen a lot of, no offense, but relatively dry social media pages posting academic stuff, and it's like there's no engagement and not getting any shares, and it's like, oh, this is great information, but the guy running it doesn't know how to use the platform, and I don't know how representative that is of the archaeology and heritage institution as a whole. Certainly with museums, there's some amazing museums. I'm looking specifically at the English Museum of Rural Life or whatever, who had like an amazing Facebook campaign a few years ago. And then there's some really terrible museums who maybe post a picture with a caption once every couple of weeks, and that's the end of that. But it's very variable in my experience as a participant and an observer.
Oh, good.
Can I just jump
don't
in
wait
there?
for me to give you the sign.
Okay.
If you want to say, just say.
Yeah, I think this is some really interesting points that Nadeem brought up. Partly because, like, as someone who now works in digital marketing, a lot of my job currently involves like SEO, and also I've done a bunch of training on like, what are ways to like get people to work the algorithm in your favor so that people are seeing your content and then also engaging with it and stuff. And I think it's something that people tend to, I don't know, like it seems like it's a lot more difficult than it actually is. So just like doing like a little bit of basic SEO training or paying attention to stuff going behind the algorithm for things like museums, like learning about like what kind of hashtags you should be using on Instagram. Like if you're posting on a Friday, use hashtag Friday, that kind of stuff to try and help get things out to like a broader audience, or even on YouTube as well, like making sure that if you're going to produce a video, you're using like keywords and you're thinking about these things when you're crafting your content, because it seems like it's a bit like, oh, does it really work? But I have found in my experience on YouTube, when I kind of look at that stuff and I put that effort into making sure I have keywords in my title, in my description of my video, in my thumbnail, in the title of my video file, putting on tags, like it takes 10 minutes extra to do all that stuff, but it really helps get things out to like a broader audience. But it can also sometimes have a knock-on effect for people with disabilities, like with Amelia, because, when you fill out alt text for an image that you're putting out on social media, that makes it more accessible for people with visual disabilities. And it also works in your favor because algorithms can't read images, but they can read alt descriptions. So put them in.
Are you taking notes? Are you listeners taking notes? Listen to the expert here. Like, she's trying to help us with the algorithm, which can be, thank you, Megan, which can be
I'm not an expert, but yeah.
These can be a little bit of a pain. We know that. Yeah, Tash, go ahead.
I was just going to say as well, I think organizations are afraid of social media still. I think that's maybe most of the root when it comes down to, like, going on from what Nadeem said and then what Rachel just mentioned as well. Unless you have someone whose job it is to create digital content for the company, and they have to follow company guidelines, companies are really scared of it. So I am also a creative producer at a company in London, archaeology company in London. And everything I create goes through a chain, right? So people are scared of the content. They're scared to let, the public see that someone is explaining something, and they might say, oh, we think it's this age. They don't like the word think. They're like, no, they must know it's that age. It's this deposit is from this time period, because you have to show that you know your stuff. But actually, archaeology is interpretation, and it's showing that, especially with, I think, Instagram, TikTok, all these sort of platforms that are very interactive. I think people like that more. They're sort of, it's the human element of it. So something to think about. And I just wanted to shout out, there's a really cool TikTok museum, the Black Country Museum, and their TikToks are awesome. Awesome. It's a nice example to use of what you could do.
Yeah, I've also noticed that this like I don't want to say it's generational because I don't think it goes through a generation, but sometimes it really feels like people are from a certain age, some of them have convinced themselves that this is just not their cup of tea. It's not for them, so therefore they're not going to try it. However, you would be surprised, for example, in my own case, in Twitch, my audience says, I think the youngest is 14 and the eldest is nearly 60. A 60-year-old person using Twitch, gold. Like that's the best thing that happened to me, learning that people say. So, oh, I see Nadeem, you have your hand raised, so you can go first, and then we'll move to Karen, who also has her hand.
Oh, so this is just a counterpoint to the whole posting on social media, and you mentioned something about this artifact is from this date versus we think this artifact is from this date, and I wonder if there's a slight difference here between personal versus institutional social media accounts, because when I post stuff, people tend to engage very well with the I don't have a clue what's going on here. Here's what I think. Here's why I think it kind of posts, as opposed to the here is a fact kind of posts. If that makes sense. Yeah.
What it is it's not necessarily about the artifacts. They could say, okay, we know it's from the 2nd century to the 4th century, and they can say that it's that time range. It's when, for example, they're looking at an archaeological deposit and explaining what they think is happening with the different structures that they're seeing. That's when they stumble a little bit. But these are the bits personally that I would love to see more online, is having access to active digs and letting the public see the whole process. Sorry, that was the angle I meant. I didn't explain.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah, no, I understand. Yeah, that's fine. But
I see what you mean, though, Nadeem. I think it's true.
You're correct. So when it comes to seeing active digs, there's like photos of guys working in the field and like informal pictures of, hey, look at this bone comb I found, whatever. That doesn't happen. And if it does happen, it's on sort of personal like Facebook accounts or whatever, where it's not publicly viewable. It's like viewable for friends. So, I get some behind the scenes info from some of the Sogdian digs, but obviously, because it's until it's published, it's not really. And I guess there's this hesitancy of putting info out there before it's published and analyzed and whatever, in case I don't know, in case somebody else takes the information and runs it and comes to a different conclusion. I don't really know that side of things, but yeah.
So Karen, what do you want to say?
Yeah, well, actually, I'll first quickly address the point that Nadeem and Natasha were just making about the desire to get more real-time active dig footage out there. And I mean, I agree on the one hand. On the other hand, having spent a lot of time doing field archaeology, it mostly tends to be kind of like watching bread rise. I mean, it can be very carefully curated and presented in a way that is actually meaningful to the general public. But there is one outfit that I would like to give a call out to here that is fantastic on social media and digital media platforms addressed to the public in general, and that's called Dig Ventures. And you can Google them. They have a great website. They do all sorts of free educational programming, and they do a really good job, I think, of minus all of the production company benefits. Tash, for example, on doing the Great British Dig or something, you could tell us all day long about, the difference between what's happening when you're digging in the field and what actually gets presented as this is us digging this site. Another topic, but anyway, Dig Ventures, I think, does a pretty good job of quote unquote real-time public access to digging. But going back to the other point, which I had my hand raised for, I agree completely that so many social media posts that various heritage organizations put out are well-meaning, they're accurate, they're full of all sorts of fantastic facts and data, but they're kind of like the equivalent of a scholarly paper. It has its purpose. The audience doesn't hang out on social media looking for it. And yes, you need to be really careful whenever you're putting something out in a popular media channel about the past that is going to be viewed by people as true, because they don't maybe know as much about it as you do. So factual information is so important, but I think that the even more important in some of these digital platforms is the ability to tell a story, evoke emotion, a connection with these ancient artifacts or a site, tell people why it matters. We're going to be able to accept that all of these facts are incredible, but until you can actually hook them, you're essentially, in my mind, presenting the academic version that's not adapted for its purpose to the broad audience. So storytelling's key, I think.
I think that is a fantastic point. And yes, I think all of us who actually have any kind of social media account and we engage with the public, Natasha said before that what seems to be the most, I don't want to think successful in that way, but you know what I mean. Like the people like interaction, they want to be able to ask, they want to feel like they're participating in the conversation and not only learning from you, but maybe bringing something themselves. I mean, the closest example is that I am reading the Book of Kings, the Shahnameh, in my Twitch channel, and they really like it because I explained to them that why, and then this person did this. But why? Why is it important? What does it mean? Would it mean something else if he or she did otherwise? So I think the ability to perform a story, like a narration, and create a story that's more engaging, that would be the first steps to bringing people closer to history, and then to, they can work from there. Rachel, I see you have your hand raised, and yeah, just take it away.
I don't know if I can take the hand down now that I'm speaking, but I think Nadeem and Natasha had a really good point there about, I think the thing with a lot of like official archaeological companies, be they museums, commercial archaeology or anything, I think that they're afraid to be vulnerable because there's this whole idea of like, if I look insecure, then people aren't going to come to me as an expert, and that's going to like undermine my expertise, I guess, or this image of myself as an expert. And then as well, it's this whole aspect of wanting to have control, because I mean, at least in my experience, because I worked in a very similar situation to Natasha with companies, like you get burned when sometimes you have a journalist who just like runs away with something and you're like, that's not what I meant. But the thing that I find really frustrating is that these companies don't understand that social media in particular is a way for you to control that narrative by putting that stuff out yourself. And also, I have found, I think the stuff that is vulnerable, like you were saying, I don't know what this is or whatever, is the things that people tend to connect with the most. And as well, Karen, bringing that, because I had thoughts while everybody was talking. I think it's really interesting when you talk about storytelling, because people don't seem to realize something like, there's different mediums for everything. If you're talking about, say, for example, right now they're adapting one of my favorite book series into a TV show, and there's people all over the place like complaining about this thing hasn't been put in or this isn't put in, and it's like, well, it's a different medium. So that's the same thing for social media. You have your academic speak that's all very rigorous and it's got all the fancy words in it stuff, and that's for publishing and that's for the official literature. But then you have to be able to take that and translate it into a different medium for a more accessible audience, because there's lots of different audiences that you need to be able to come up to talk to.
That is great. I actually want to welcome Annelise. Hi, welcome. Happy International Archaeology Day to you. And other question that I wanted to ask you is that you've already talked about this, because you talked about the advantages of using social media to share with the public. And we also talked about the risks and disadvantages, but I want to dig a little deeper. Any fan of The Princess and the Frog here? No, just me? Okay. And I want to ask you about that, because even though we can focus on the positive, and totally we should, what do you think would be the biggest disadvantages of social media and sharing archaeological work or just historical speech? Amelia, you had those. Go for it. I think you do, don't you? If it was a mistake, yes. I apologize.
Yes. So yeah, when you're telling a story, so I think the first thing, starting with my account, is honestly, I was trying to find people that were like me. So people that, were, more interested in like the deaf archaeologists, since about 2015, 2017, I, have kind of been the only one. So, as far as using American Sign Language to explain, archaeology and the things that we do, it's different for people that are able to hear. So starting with my account, people were like, oh, wow, this is amazing. And they started, picking up more on deaf people in the archaeological field and, seeing it like on Twitter and on other social media accounts. And I mean, it's been great. So like the next, issue that I've come across is like, okay, so how do we bring, archaeology into a more, I guess, simple and a more accessible way? Because, a lot of people, don't truly understand what archaeology is really about. And so that's something that we are trying to, teach, something that we are trying to explain. It's like, no, we don't just, dig for dinosaurs and, looking for fancy bones. So it's, kind of just showing what it is really about and just changing that misunderstanding so that people do understand what we are actually about. And, bringing that education about what archaeologists do and, the reality of our profession and, matching that with the deaf community and what that looks like. So it seems like a lot of that, hasn't happened lately. So that's something that I would like to improve upon. How do we find, that middle ground of bringing that education, to the deaf community and educating about archaeology?
That is such a brilliant point to take into account. Annelise, what's your response to this?
All right, officially unmuting myself. Hello. To Amelia's exact point, that's been such an interesting thing that I think we've all been dealing with, especially on Twitter and on some of the other platforms as well, like Instagram and TikTok, for those of us who are brave enough to wade into that. It's been very, very interesting seeing how we use those platforms as archaeologists and also individuals to interact with peers in our community, as well as the general public. And I found that Twitter seems to be, to me, it seems almost like I'm at a conference and I'm just talking to other archaeologists a lot. I'm talking to other people within the profession in various different degrees and areas, just because it's such a wide platform. But TikTok, of all places, is the place where I feel like I am standing in front of a humongous auditorium of people doing a live Q&A anytime I make a video. And that feels like I am directly interacting with the public. And it really does feel like the most aggressive form of public engagement for us. And it's very interesting to see the feedback, because the comments are, well, it's the comment section, and it can be good, it can be bad. The response does seem to be overwhelmingly enthusiastic. People love history, people love archaeology, and they want to know what we're doing. They want to know about all of these cool things that maybe they only got a taste of in a, elementary or high school history book. So they've always wondered about these sorts of things. And now they've been presented with an opportunity to actually hear directly from someone in the community, and they love it. They love it. They ask so many questions, and it's a really interesting new platform for all of this, because for so long I feel like we've basically been a couple steps back from the public. We've been behind a screen, whether that's been a TV screen in the case of a documentary show, or maybe a feature documentary, those old school National Geographic type things with, big sweeping views of Egypt and the pyramids, or even behind a podium, if it's a class or at a conference presentation. We've always been a step behind, but now they're having a chance to interact and interface with us directly. And it's a little scary, it's a little loud, but I think it's ultimately a good thing, because it's starting to slowly break down those preconceptions about who we are and what we do. And hopefully one less person will think that we dig up dinosaur bones. But yeah, it's an interesting new frontier.
Which, by the way, you don't, right? I'm not an archaeologist. You don't.
No,
you don't?
I love
anyone?
dinosaurs. I respect them, and I respect all of my friends who practice the paleontological arts. I respect dinosaurs, but that's a little bit too old. So I'll leave that to the professionals. But yeah, it's very interesting, and yeah, I deal with a lot of other weirdnesses about the profession from the TV production end of things too, because people have a lot of conceptions, preconceptions and misconceptions about archaeology and who we are and what we do. So it's very interesting to see how we can slowly start breaking those down and slowly start kind of coming out from behind, you know, the podium or the classroom or even the conference paper.
I'm so glad I'm moderating this paper. These people, my kind of people, thank you, whoever's in charge. I have a question. We actually do have a question from Janice on YouTube, and it's really a good one. I'm going to read it as it was posted. What do you think about virtual museums? Virtual museums that exist completely online and do not physically have a building or space. How do you think that changes how audiences and the general public engage in these virtual exhibitions of podcasts and object images? Nadeem, brother, do you want to take the first answer?
Hello, yes. Okay, so my thoughts on virtual museums are very mixed. And so there's a reason I'm saying this. So it depends very much on what the data being put forward is by the virtual museum. I mean, are we saying a virtual museum is basically the same as, say, searching the Met Museum or the British Museum online collection and going off the data like that, or is it like a separate thing entirely?
I think they refer to a separate thing entirely because the questions specify have not a physical space. So even though the Metropolitan or the Pergamon Museum can do a virtual tour, you can still go physically there. And
yeah, exactly. And so what I think is, so I've seen one or two virtual museums online, and not gonna lie, I wasn't that impressed. And so the reason that's the case, so it's great for accessibility, but on the other hand, the pictures are usually not that great. And the other thing is when you have the physical object with you, you can look at it from different angles and whatever. And so when I do a lot of museum photography, and I'm always looking at the weird angles that no one else looks at, because I'm trying to figure out how this thing it was built or how it was worn or how it functioned, rather than the artistic merits of it. So it's a different thing what you're looking at. Whereas usually an online museum will post like the most impressive picture only, which will be the artistic merit picture or something like that. And it won't show us the back where the tool marks are, or where the loops and the rivets are, or where like the random traces of textile or wood or whatever that no one really cares about from an artistic point of view are. So that's one thing. I mean, yeah, like I said, mixed, because the accessibility is a big bonus for it, but yeah, I have my reservations about them.
So Amelia, do you want to answer to this question too?
I do. I completely agree with you, 100%. Physically, it's always better to visit the museum. You see it in person. And like he said, you can see every aspect of it in 4D, 3D. But the accessibility is pretty impressive, to be honest. We actually have improved the videos and pictures and other ways to make it more accessible. Sometimes people can't actually afford to go to the city, or it's not wheelchair accessible because it's an older museum and they want to see that site. So it's for accessibility. I think as a broader audience, it's important that we can grab and get the attention of more people. If they're going to skip out on it, they wouldn't be able to see it. I'm not sure how many % of people in the world are disabled. And a specific % of people in the world that are disabled. Tons of disabled people in the world. So if you think about that part of it, even if a virtual museum is great, it's excellent, anyone can access it. And you can improve it and change and make it better. I'm sure that they could, for technology. It's not going to be 100% equal to a physical museum and going in and seeing it. But for us, that we're disabled people with an ADA, especially, it's not 100% accessible at a physical museum. So about 85% accessible, that would be, that's what we care about. So a virtual museum in that aspect, for the future, I think it could be improved. And for the deaf community, I think it's great an opportunity for us to see what we couldn't see physically.
Yes, definitely agree with you. Thank you for the comments. So I think, what we need is more cooperation, I guess, or paying work even between museums and photographers and 3D scanning technologies and 3D printing and those sorts of things, which would take digital museums to like a whole new level. Yeah.
I agree.
Sorry, I think it's going to be the future of museums, because if we look at, there's a lot of artifacts in the British Museum, for instance, that debatably should not be there. So I think maybe the future of being able to view world heritage, or even people to access their own heritage because they're in a museum in Europe, this is probably going to be that way, so they can enjoy it, have it in their language, have it accessible. So actually, I think it is the future, and we should be pushing more for it. I remember Google Culture and Arts, if I remember correctly. I think they maybe were one of the first to start these sort of like VR integrated sort of platforms where you could go into the museum and then obviously see some artifacts and do the sort of 3D model. And the fact that now 3D modeling is more accessible, museums have actually let the data be available so people could print their own 3D artifacts. I think all of this is probably going to be a part of the a future museum aspect. I mean, if we look at something called NFTs, which is non-fungible tokens, they have in the metaverse, they have like an online virtual museum called B20. And the concept is a lot of people can go and they can see the art that's been bought by others digitally. So slowly, there's more people looking into making an online platform that happens to be a museum specifically, or an art gallery. I just think actually now we're hearing more about it. I think it's been going on for a while, and as technology progresses, so will the interaction and accessibility for all. That's it.
Indeed. Yeah, no, I think there's a big difference between museums in, say, the UK, the US, Europe doing virtual stuff, and museums in the global South trying to do virtual stuff. Here we have all the resources to be able to do that. That's not necessarily the case in other countries. So we definitely need to build up those resources. Yeah.
So Annelise, you wanted to add something to?
Yes. Yes, I did. I think access is probably the biggest plus to the idea of a virtual museum. As someone who actually, I love going to physical museum spaces, but more often than not, I find that I am not traveling. And even with my work, when I'm doing research for things, I find it's very, very, very difficult, sometimes impossible, to find a usable image of the artifact that I'm researching or looking up, or even just a relevant object from a person, place, or culture or time period that I'm researching. And I know, I can do a little bit of Googling. I can find like, oh, maybe it's in the Louvre. Oh, maybe it's in the British Museum. That's great. Why can I not see it? I would like to see this, an image of this object with my eyes, and ideally something that is well photographed, of a decent amount of pixels, so that if needed, I can potentially purchase or license this image for use in whatever it is I'm working on. That seems to be the biggest issue.
Annelise, sorry to interrupt you here. Every single art history PhD is feeling so seen at this minute.
Yes.
You're talking about all the stuff. It feels like, yes, thank you, that happens.
Yes, it really, truly, my kingdom for a high resolution image of the artifact that I'm looking for, that is also potentially available for use, ideally something that's in the public domain, thank you to the Met, or available for purchase for a reasonable price. Mostly this is just an opportunity to shout out the Met Museum, because they've put so much of their collection online, and they've made it available for use in the public domain, which means it's free, yay! Other places like the British Museum, not so much. The Louvre is basically impossible. I wish these museums could all talk to each other, because that level of access for just the casual museum goer, a student, or even someone like me who occasionally has to, research things. If I'm looking for a specific, I don't know, Maya vase, for example, like where am I going to find this? I am not able to go to Mexico, but if I know that an example of this vase is available in a certain museum, I can hopefully go to that museum's website and see an image of that object. That level of access alone is really all I want in life. That's it.
And just jumping in, Annelise, you just reminded me, like, how many artifacts are sitting in a storage unit somewhere in a museum? Imagine if we could see that virtually. That would be enough. How amazing would that be? Just thought.
I just want one photo.
Definitely.
One photo. That's all I want. That's all I want in life. Just one image, and ideally something that I can use.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
I'm so sorry, Annelise. It's nice to meet you, by the way. We've been Twitter correspondents for some time in that virtual conference atmosphere that you describe. I agree with you. But Tash, exactly this point I was thinking as you were talking about, for example, the British Museum specifically is one that comes to mind as, aside from what is on display and whether it ought to be there on display, the vast majority of the holdings are not on display. They're stored, and that they're absolutely as inaccessible as they possibly could be. And I have as much of a problem with that as all of the questions about, where they rightfully belong. So I really think that would be terrific. And not just for people like us, Annelise, who need to see these objects sometimes for our research, but for everybody whose cultural patrimony they represent.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I remember just a quick anecdote in here. I went to the Brooklyn Museum to work with some pieces, and because they were under construction, I was brought to the storage part where the Islamic items were kept. And I agreed to see one vase and one tile in the shape of a very beautiful star. And when I arrived there, I saw a box with another tile. And the curator I was with, I asked her, "Oh, what is that?" It's like, "Oh, that's another tile. Never was on display in the history of the museum." Like, can I see it? Because it looks like it's interesting for my research. And it was. I can't post it though. I can't include it in my research because it was never revealed to the public. So I have a secret tile on my dissertation. But that kind of thing. And I also agree with Natasha when she was talking so much about digital reconstruction and about being able to create 3D models. You can spin, you can look at many different perspectives for playing around or for getting information, but that is such a way of making this accessible. This has been such an interesting conversation, and I wish it would not stop. But now we have actually 5 minutes to spare. Amelie, do you want to say something? Because I see your hand is rose. Yes.
I do. Yes, thank you. I wanted to add, I'm not sure whoever had said it. I'm sorry. I was looking around, but someone had mentioned the other people in other countries can look into their own culture. And, they physically can't go there. I'm not sure who said it. I apologize for not naming that, but I totally agree with that. So my point to that, basically reiterating that, for example, deaf people and the deaf culture, we typically have our community, and we don't earn a lot of money. We don't have, most of us don't have employment. We're not employed. We're not well off, so we don't get paid a lot of money. So what they do is the people that are well off, like I say, we have different cultures, Black, Hispanic. They can look at their own culture online in different countries. There's no way for them to actually physically go there. So who I was saying that I was going to iterate that learning about your own culture, and specifically deaf people and in other countries, that just bothers me the most. When whoever said that, in the bigger museums, we should, like the Met, we should be able to have it open and see, this is where we're from. This is the different cultures that we have. So in order to make that accessible would be the number one takeaway.
Nadeem, very brief, please.
Hello. Yes. So a point in regards to people being able to see their own culture that isn't necessarily in the museum of their home country. I think replicas can play a really good role here, because you can keep one object in the home country and make a copy of it and take it wherever you want, right? And the cool thing about replicas is you can handle them, which I I think it's a much better way than just looking at it. And especially if you have visually impaired people, being able to, feel something might be more accessible to them than just being able to, not look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. The Romans used to do that all the time, and we have those statues in the museums now. Why can't we imitate the Romans that we supposedly like so much? So this has been just fantastic. If someone in the audiences wanted to ask any question, people who are watching us on YouTube, I've heard Plumas. Thank you, Nadeem. Yeah, sure. You do.
Amelia, can you teach us how to say archaeology? To sign archaeology? I've forgotten. I know amphora. But can you do archaeology? It'd be quite nice to learn something.
Okay, amphora is this.
Yeah, yep. Amphora.
And archaeology is this. Mm-hmm.
Ah.
Yep, like digging into your palm. Yep. Cool.
How do you say archaeology digs?
Yeah, I'm happy international. There you go. Happy. Here we go. International Archaeology Day. Those 4 signs together.
We're going to practice. We're going to, for the next year, because I'm pretty sure this is going to be repeated, we're going to nail it. We're just going to do it. I think we have someone in the chat, thank you, in June, saying I've heard Plumas say that serious is not the opposite of fun. And as a history fan, I really like to find accounts on social media where I can learn and have fun as well. And I think there is a large audience for creators of history content. I think so. I think one of the big discoveries of social media and history merging together is that, as Karen and Annelise and Natasha were saying, the audiences are there and they really like this. They really like archaeology and history, and they really like them to be acknowledged as an audience and the discourse being adapted to it. Again, I'm very happy I moderated this panel. This is such my thing to do for a Saturday afternoon. Thank you so much to everyone who's joined us. Again, ladies, gentlemen, and beings of the supernatural realm, happy International Archaeology Day. I really hope this is going to be the first of many. Thank you so much to the Safe Cultural Heritage Group. Viste, que bello. And I'm going to hand them over to them. Thank you for letting me blob and speak non-stop for the first 10 minutes of this. And just over to you.
Thank you so much for this amazing afternoon with all 3 panels. Thank you so much to the moderators. I hope you had also a great time as our team has had, and we're all happy that you were able to join, and we look forward to many other events like this, and have a great weekend.
Thank you so much to you for organizing this, and see you next year.